In this video, we will talk about thematic analysis. This is a common approach to textual analysis in qualitative research. It's widely used, but often the name thematic analysis is not used by researchers. A lot of researchers will do something that's very similar to what I will present here as thematic analysis, but they might not necessarily refer to it as doing thematic analysis. They might refer to it as coding or analyzing the data, but what they do is very similar to this approach to textual analysis that we call thematic analysis. There are different ways of doing thematic analysis. In this video, I will base the presentation on the article by Braun and Clark, which is considered a key text in defining thematic analysis. And I will talk about what thematic analysis is and present a step-by-step guide which Braun and Clark have developed on how to do thematic analysis. First of all, what is thematic analysis? Braun and Clark define it as a method for identifying, analyzing, and reporting patterns or themes within data. So thematic analysis is a lot about finding these patterns or themes within the data that help you to understand the meaning that the data contains. It's a very generic approach that makes it very flexible. It can be used with different research questions at the starting point, used to analyze different kinds of text, different topics. And it's a method or approach for data analysis which can be used across different theoretical and epistemological approaches, which makes it very flexible. However, if you want to move beyond just describing your data, you need to combine thematic analysis with some kind of theoretical perspectives that can give you more specific tools to interpret your data. And there's a video that talks more about interpreting qualitative data, where I talk more about how to use theory in qualitative data analysis. So I encourage you to also look at that one to understand better how thematic analysis can be combined with using theoretical approaches to interpret and not just describe the data. Braun and Clark, they identify 6 different phases in thematic analysis. And they underline that although these phases are listed up one by one, as though you move from the first to the second to the third to the fourth, etc., they underline that analysis is not a very simple linear process. So you do not, in practice, move from one phase, then you finish that phase, then you move on to the next phase, finish that one, move on to the third phase, etc. Instead, analysis is often what we call recursive, where you move back and forth between the different phases as needed. You learn something new, you go back to the previous phase, apply that thing you learned, rework your analysis, then you move on to a phase again, and back and forth as much as needed. But let's, for clarity, for the sake of this video, go through these 6 phases one by one. And the first phase involves familiarizing yourself with your data. That could mean that you transcribe interview data if you're using interviews, or if you're using written text and you already have the text in written form. But if your texts are more visual or verbal, in terms of like could be a radio show, a speech that's not written down, but it's an audio file, or a TV show, you might want to transcribe your data first. And then you familiarize yourself with your data simply by reading through the data several times, trying to take notes, write down ideas, just be kind of open and write down anything you see that seems interesting without having to justify why this is interesting or say what it means. Just become familiar with the content and the form of your data. In the second phase, you start generating initial codes. And codes are short labels that serve to identify an interesting aspect of your data. There's a separate video on coding, so I will not go into detail on that now. But coding is a technique that's used in thematic analysis, but also in other kinds of analysis. And that helps you to kind of get some keywords or labels for your data that can help you to see what's in the data and organize it. In the third phase, you start searching for themes, and you do that by sorting the codes from the second phase into different themes, finding codes that kind of fit together, that have some kind of connection, that you can say kind of make up a theme. And you can use tables, you can use mind maps, you can use post-it notes to help you sort and organize the codes. And in the process, maybe some of the codes will become a main theme, some codes will form a sub-theme within a main theme, whereas other codes will be discarded altogether. In the fourth phase, you go through the themes and review them. First, you read through all the data extracts, all the parts of the data that are linked to one theme, to check if that theme actually forms a coherent pattern, because a theme should be a pattern. There should be some coherence here. If the extracts from the data do not fit together, you might have to rework the theme. You might have to split it up in two themes, create a new theme, move some of the extracts to another theme, or discard some extracts because they didn't fit into this theme. Secondly, you read through all your themes to check how they fit in with the data set entirely. And in this process, you might come across data that you missed and that you want to code and include into a theme. And you might also need to go back to some of these earlier phases. In phase 5, you look at the themes and try to define and name them to get a better understanding of what each theme contains. So themes should be coherent. There should be some kind of link between the different parts of the theme, but they also should not be too broad. And to define what the theme is about, you can try to describe the content of the theme in a couple of sentences. And try to kind of identify what links the different parts of the theme together and how the theme fits into kind of more like the overall argument of your research. In this phase, you also decide whether the theme includes any sub-themes or if it's more of a theme in itself. And you think about the name that you want to give each theme. Like giving a theme a name is a good way of trying to summarize for yourself, but also to communicate to the reader what this theme is all about. And in the last phase, that's when you start writing out the analysis and produce the actual research report. You include extracts from the data, but you should also do more than just kind of presenting the data. You need to place the data extracts within the argument that you're making and relate the extracts to the research question. So these are the 6 phases in thematic analysis. And to understand even better what thematic analysis is, I also encourage you to read the article by Braun and Clark. They also include some examples from their own research and some examples of mind maps that show different themes that they identified in their research, which is useful to in order to understand better, to get an illustration of how thematic analysis can be used.